Okay. Okay.
Oh, wow. He's my enforcer in my professional life.
Huh.
I didn't know that. I got to be nice to you.
Oh, wow. It's just got like a little more intense over here. Okay.
I got to be nice.
Wow. That's exciting. Okay. Kuf Chav Daled Amud Beis. We are, if you remember, we had this machlokas Rava and Rabba about the parameters of muktzah. Rabba being more machmir and Rava being more mekel. And and we talked about the different categories, kli shamlach leheter, and what you're allowed to do with it. Rava says a kli shamlach leheter, a utensil which is used for permitted purposes, you can move it for its own use, you can move it for its place, you can even move it to protect it from the sun. And you have Rabba who says a kli shamlach leheter cannot be moved for its protection. So again, if you have a kli shamlach leheter, which you have a stroller outside, you can't move it in from the rain. Okay? So says the Gemara, Rav Savala lahad Rava. Rav also agrees with Rava, who holds that you're allowed, who has a more permissible view of moving an object for the sake of its place. Who says that you're allowed to move an object, you're allowed to move a kli shamlach leheter for the sake of moving it for needing its place. Whereas again, Rabbah said, if you need the place of a kli shamlach leheter, you're not allowed to move it, right? So if this tissue box over here, according to Rava, if I want to dab it in the space, I'd be allowed to move this. Whereas according to Rabbah, I'm not allowed to move it because I'm not using the tissue box for the sake of the tissue box, and therefore he says it can be done. Okay, so says the Gemara, Damarav, where do we see that Rav holds the more permissible view? Damarav, Rav said, Mar shelo yiganev. A mar is sometimes it means like a mister or a master, but over here it means a hoe, a tool. It could be moved so that it's not stolen. Zel tiltel shelo l'tzarech v'aser. Okay, so moving a hoe for it to not be stolen, that is not allowed. Okay, taima shelo yiganev. The reason that it's not allowed to be moved is because to ensure that it doesn't get stolen. L'tzarech gufo, l'tzarech mekomo, mutter. Sorry, I mixed up. I'm sorry. Rava and Rabba are talking about a kli shamlach le'iser. So we're talking about a hammer, right? So Rava holds if the hammer is over here, I'd be allowed to move this hammer so I could daven over here. Rava says no, I can't move the hammer unless I'm using it to break nuts. Right? So Rav over here is saying that I'm allowed to move a hoe, which is like a hammer. I can't move it to ensure that it doesn't get stolen. But if I want to move it because I need its place, then it's permitted. Right? If I need the hoe to use it for a permitted purpose, or I need it for its space, then it's permitted. Ask the Gemara, Aini, is that so that Rav has that permissible view? Rav Kahana visited the house of Rav Amar, and Rav said to the members of his household, bring the trap for kahana to sit on. Now a trap is a kli shamlach le'iser, and why does he have to say to sit on it? Let him just say, bring it. Right? The fact that he has to say to hit on it, to sit on it, is lav lememra, is not to say to davar shamlach le'iser, l'tzorach gufo in, l'tzorach mekom alo. It obviously what he's saying is that because it's only allowed because of the fact that we're using it for permissible purpose, that because he wanted to ensure that no one thinks that he's allowing it to be moved because you need its place. So Gemara says, no, shkulu shusa mikame kahana. Take it away from kahana. In other words, actually, Rav was actually saying exactly what we want him to say, because he was saying, move this item away from kahana so kahana can sit down. Meaning, you're allowed to move it letzorech mekomo, for its place, right? Alternatively, the trap, again, the kli shamlach le'iser was in the sun, and therefore he had to go out of his way to say it was being moved to sit on it, because he didn't want anyone to think you're allowed to move a kli shamlach le'iser for the sake of protection, and therefore he says, oh, move it so he can sit on it. Not because you will not be allowed to move it for the sake of its space. It was just that he was afraid that someone would see them moving it from outside and think that they're moving it to protect it. He was saying, no, it's going to be moved to sit on it. But really, again, Rav does concurs with Rava that a kli shamlach le'iser can be moved even litzorech mekomo for the sake of its space. Okay? Rav Mari Bey Bar Rachel Havileahi Bar Bey Sadyavasa B'Shimsha. Rav Mari Bar Rachel had some felt pillows which were lying in the sun. Felt pillows how do we categorize this? Was it kli shamlach le'iser or kli shamlach leheter? Pillows. Heter, right? They're basically, it's permitted. There's nothing wrong with pillows. It's a regular pillow. You sleep on it, right? Totally fine. Now again, according to Rava, what does Rava hold about a kli shamlach leheter? Are you allowed to move it from outside when it's going to be damaged inside? Rava says yes. Rava says no. Okay, and right, remember this is Rava that more vase is like softer. Rava is the base is a harder thing. Rava's more machmir. Rava says you can't move it to protect it. Right? You're allowed to move it for any other purpose, but to protect you can't do it. Rava says you are allowed to. Okay, so this man, this Rav Mari Bar Rachel, had these kli shamlach leheter, and he goes to Rava, who normally holds these things to be moved in order, even to protect it. And he comes before me and says, Asmei de Rava, and he says, Amarle, am I allowed to move these pillows? I'm allowed to move them indoors so they don't get ruined by the sun. Amarle, Shrei. Rava says, no problem. Then Ramari says, wait, Isli Achrina, but I have other pillows. I don't really need these pillows. Am I still allowed to do it? So he says, Chazla Orchin. He says, yeah, they're still suitable for guests. You can still move it. Don't worry. Then he says, Isli Namil Orchim. He says, oh, but I have like a huge stock. My linen closet is packed with pillows. I have enough for all the possible guests in the world. Amalei, Rava says to him, listen, clearly you hold like the more machmer opinion like Rabba, who says that you're not allowed to move pillows, to protect them. And therefore he says, L'kuli al mashri. I hold for everyone it's mutter. L'didcha aser, for you it's forbidden, because you hold like Rabba. What do you want for my life? In other words, Rabba says, I hold a pillow, which is a klish l'achleter, can be moved. You clearly hold like Rabba. That's why we keep on asking all these questions. So for you it's forbidden. Don't ask me these questions. Okay. Amar Ravi Abba, Amar Rav Abba, Amar Rav Chia Barashi, Amar Rav, Machbedo Shamelsa Mutter L'Tazl Shabbos. Brooms of cloth may be moved on Shabbos. Okay, so back in the day, there's two types of brooms. You had a small, handheld, a one-hand broom, which was used for the tables, which they used to clear the tables. It was a broom of cloth. And then they had a broom which was used to sweep the floor, which was made out of made out of lulavan. That's what it was made of. It was made basically, it had like these leaves in the bottom, and they would use it to sweep. Now, also keep in mind, back in the day, their floors were not made with stone or with carpet. They're made with dirt, and therefore it was actually forbidden to sweep inside your house, because there was a concern that you're going to go ahead, and if there are any holes in the floor, which was quite common, you're going to close those holes up, which would be a form of building, and therefore not allowed. So you're not allowed to sweep in your house on Shabbos, okay? With the big broom, with the broom that goes on the floor. Amar Rav Abba, Amar Rav Chia Barashi, Amar Rav. A broom of cloth which is used for the table, that is allowed to be moved on Shabbos, tomorrow low, but palm leaves, right, a lulav, it cannot be moved. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Afshal tomorrow. Rabbi Elazar says, no, you even are allowed to move palm leaves. Ask the Gemara, what's the case they're talking about? If you want to say we're using it for its own use, meaning you're using this broom not for sweeping the floor, everyone agrees that's forbidden, but you have some spices up on the top shelf and you want to use the lulav to get it down, okay? Or it's sitting in a place where you're about to sit down, okay? So he says, Baha lema Rav shel tomorrow lo. Okay, but you're going to tell me that Rav, which is who we just quoted, says tomorrow lo, that the palm leaves cannot be used. Why can't he be using it? Rav kirava svirle. Doesn't he hold? Didn't we just establish that Rav holds like Rava, that a klish malachlis, or a broom, which is a klish malachlis, is allowed to be used for its space or for a permitted purpose, right? So why would he say it's forbidden? We have to say that we're talking about a case of moving the broom from the sun to the shade for its protection. But Lema Rabbi Elazar, Afshal Tamarim, Rabbi Elazar over here, again, Rabbi Elazar was the second opinion, says, even the brooms of palm leaves are allowed to be moved. He would hold that who holds a klishim lach isser, right? No one holds a klishim lach isser can be moved for its protection. So what's going on over here? So Gemara says the olam echam letzel. Really, we're talking about a case of moving the broom from the sun to the shade, and we now understand the first opinion, who says that this brooms of the regular broom can only be moved if I'm using it for a permitted purpose or because I needed space. So what's the deal with Rabbi Elazar? Ema, you have to amend Rabbi Elazar's words. Ema v'chein amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar said likewise. It doesn't say af shel tamara, but rather Rabbi Elazar omer, like af Rabbi Elazar omer. Rabbi Elazar agrees to the first opinion, and now we don't have an issue. So this is the bottom line. This is part of the end of this discussion, and this is the way we rule. Again, that a kli shem lach le'isr, utensil which primarily used for forbidden purposes, is allowed to be moved for a permitted purpose. So again, I don't know, you have a hammer or whatever. The hammer is a classic case. You're allowed to move it to break nuts. You're allowed to move it if it's on your seats. No problem. Just pick it up and move it. Once you pick it up, you can put whatever you want. No problem. Some say if there's a non-Jew around, better for a non-Jew to do it. But if there's no non-Jew around, then you're allowed to move it. No problem. But you are not allowed to move it to protect it from the elements. So someone just they had this just they dropped their earbuds on the streets. It might even be worse. It might be a mixed machlas chisar and kiss, but it's at the very least klish machla iser, right? You can't. There's no permitted purpose. So if you're using it to hold up your sitter or whatever, I don't know how you do there with a little whatever, it can be used for any permitted purpose. It's not in your space, but it was on the street. So what they were allowed to do is kick it to the side so it wouldn't get stepped on. That's the most you could do. If you kick it all the way to your house, great, but that's the most you could do is kick it to the side. But you would not be able to pick it up because there's no permitted purpose to use it, and it's not in a place that you actually need to be stepping in there, and therefore you'd not be allowed to pick it up. Okay. Fine. Let's see the next Mishnah. Okay, now we're going to talk about a lot of broken utensils. Not as, whatever happens, utensils break. And the question is, what are you allowed to, what's the status of the broken shards? Okay, so call, and which again is certainly more common back then. We'll finish off with one, hopefully. We'll finish off with one relevant, for the modern era, one relevant halach, I believe. Kol kelim tzom Shabbos. All utensils are allowed to be moved on Shabbos. Shivreim nitalim imahem, and their fragments are allowed to be moved with them. We're going to discuss soon, did they break before Shabbos? They break on Shabbos. But the bottom line is you have a utensil, you have a glass jar, and you have the shards of glass, like a broken glass jar. You're allowed to move the glass, the shards. Uvavachu osami imalacha, says the Mishnah, as long as they can still perform some sort of task. It has to have still some function, then it could be used, okay? Shivri areva lachas ben al pi chavis, fragments of a mixing bowl still could be used to cover a cask. Right, back in the day, they didn't have those cool plugs, for your wine bottles to fill them in. They took a shard and they would cover the wine bottle. Okay, and a fragment of glass used to be covered in the mouth of a flask. Okay, same idea. Rabbi Yehuda has a more stringent view. The shards have to be used in a similar fashion than the original utensil. It's not that it can be used for anything, right? The first opinion says, as long as it's used for anything. The second opinion says, Rabbi Yehuda says it has to be used in a way that's similar to its original usage, meaning, okay, shivrei areva latzuk l'sochan mikba. Fragments of a mixing bowl, it has to still be used to pour porridge in it, right? A mixing bowl, you make porridge in it, so the shard, it's not enough that it covers now a wine bottle. It's not enough. It has to be in some similar way to the original bowl. So it has to be now put porridge in it. Glass, if you have a shard of glass, since originally it was used to fill with like oil and things like that, it still has to be large enough and usable enough that it could still capture a little bit of oil, right? So it still has to be me'ein malach, has to be the same type of original work. Okay? Fine. Says the Gemara. I'm Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Says Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, in regards to the machlokas we just saw in the Mishnah, machlokas shenishbru me'erev Shabbos. The debate between the Tanakama, who says as long as it has some function, and Rabbi Yehuda, who says it has the more particular function, is specifically shenishbru me'erev Shabbos when it broke before Shabbos began. Demar Savar, one holds me'ein malachtan and me'ein malacha acheres lo. Rabbi Yehuda, the more stringent, says that a stringent opinion says that it has to be a similar, the form or semblance of the original task, but a new task, no. Umar Savar afil me'ein malacha acheres, even a different malacha, it would be allowed. Aval nishbru b'Shabbos, but if it broke on Shabbos, next page, everyone would agree that it's permitted. Even Rabbi Yehuda would hold that if it broke on Shabbos, it's permitted. Since when it started Shabbos, it was connected to a utensil. Therefore, it should be permitted on Shabbos. So according to this view, which we're going to reject in a moment, if a utensil breaks, as long as it was a full utensil when Shabbos began, right? So now you can move it because it was part of a regular utensil on Shabbos. So practically what this would mean, you drop a piece of glass or whatever it is, you don't have to say, oh, well, it's going to potentially be dangerous. Let's say it's not dangerous. Let's say you broke something which is not dangerous at all. There's no little kids around. You don't worry about that. According to this opinion, as long as it has some function on Shabbos, everyone would agree you're allowed to move it directly, okay? So, however, we have a question on this. Most of Rav Zutrai, Masik and Mikalim and Masik and Meshivei Kalim. Okay, so a discussion about Yom Tiv, and it says we're allowed to fuel with undamaged wood utensils, but we may not fuel with fragments of broken utensils. Okay, so you're allowed to use undamaged utensils to fuel a fire, but you're not allowed to use fragments of broken utensils. Ask the Gemara, ask Rav Zutrai, when did it break? Okay, Ilam Dinishbru Erev Yom Tiv. If it broke before Yom Tiv, if something breaks before Yom Tiv, how do you see that thing? Now it's just what, we had some schach that, people, whatever, lots of misconceptions about where to do a schach. So we had some schach that broke before Sukkot, thanks to that wind, because I was showing off that it didn't happen. That part of my schach fell down, and so I had all this. What I was going to throw, you're allowed to throw it out. I was going to throw it out respectfully. I was going to throw it out. My wife said, it's great firewood, right? So when something breaks before Yom Tiv, it doesn't matter what it was. It's firewood by definition. So this Bryce would just said, broken utensils, not broken utensils, anything that broke before Yom Tiv, it's just straight up firewood. And so it can't be talking about when it broke before Yom Tiv because there's no real difference. Once it's broken, it's just fire. We treat it as firewood, right? Rather, we're talking about breaking on Yom Tiv. Viktani masikim kalim and masikim meshivei kalim. And the Bryce says you're allowed to use undamaged vessels, but you're not allowed to use fragments of vessels. Okay, so it's breaking on Yom Tiv, and we're saying that fragments of utensils cannot be used. Now, according to the view that we just saw a moment ago from Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, he said that when something breaks on Shabbos, What are you're allowed to use it because it was part of a regular utensil when Shabbos began. So on Yom Tiv, if it breaks on Yom Tiv, you should be allowed to use it. Why can't you use it? Ella iatmar hachi itmar. So really, we're rejecting the first way, and this is where we're going to learn it. I'm Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. Machlokas nishbru Shabbos. The dispute is when it breaks before on Shabbos itself. That's when the Marsavar Muchanhu. Okay, one holds that as long as it was fit before Shabbos, it's allowed. Umar Savar Noladhu. And one holds that it is nolad, which means it's something which is new, right? It's born on Shabbos. If it's born on Shabbos, then that actually would prohibit us, right? There's this concept that when something is born on Shabbos, it's new on Shabbos, you cannot use it. You know what a good example back in the day? For those of you who had fax machines. I was just asked to send a little while ago, send a fax to, someone asked to be sent a faxter by Hopper. I was like, who's sending him faxes? Well, what? I don't even know how to use a fax. I don't have a fax machine. Maybe someone here has a fax machine. I apologize. You have a fax machine. Okay, you work for...
No, I don't.
Oh, you had to have one. Okay, yeah. You remember what it is. Thank you. So it's called. No, I'm just kidding. So it's called. So bottom line is, right, that there was a big discussion about, is that nolad, right? Because it's born on Shabbos. You're even allowed to read what was written if you got a fax on Shabbos. Not version 1 when it was that mushy paper which like rolled up and got everyone dirty, but even the newer cool ones. Remember the laser printer ones, the fancy new ones? Or you're allowed to even read it because it's nolad. It's born, right? So the second opinion says that if it breaks on Shabbos, it's new. It's a new thing, and therefore it can't be used on Shabbos. Okay, Erev Shabbos, but if it would break before Shabbos, since it was fit for a new task while it was still day, right? So again, now we're understanding the Machlokes or Mishnah. If it broke on Shabbos, one opinion says since it before Shabbos was already fit for something, it's allowed. The second opinion saying that no, since it's new, since it's brand new, we treat it as something new, therefore you can't do it. Therefore you can't use it. Okay, Tani Chada, now we have a brisa, 3 brisas which have contradictory opinions. We'll line them up with different amoraim. Tani Chada Masikim Mechelim, Masikim Mashivir Kelim. One holds that you're allowed to fuel a fire, we're talking about Yom Tiv, with undamaged utensils, but you're not allowed to fuel it with broken utensils, right? You're allowed to take a cup and throw it into a wooden cup and throw it into the fire. A broken cup, you can't do so. The Tani Idach, brisa number 2 says, Kishim Masikim Mechelim, Kapasim Mashivir Kelim. The second opinion is very permissible, okay, permissive. It says not only are you allowed to use regular utensils, you could even use broken ones. The third one, the third opinion says you can't use, not only can you not use broken ones, you can't even use full wooden cups on Yom Tiv to make a fire. Okay, so this is Gemara, Harb Yehuda, Harb Shimon, Harb Nechemia. These 3 views line up with different views. Rav Nechemia, let's go backwards. Rav Nechemia was the one, remember he said that you're only allowed to use a utensil for its stated purpose. And therefore Rav Nechemia would hold that you're only allowed to use a cup for drinking. You cannot use a cup for any other purpose. Even if it's a permitted purpose, you can't do it. That's in the limitations of Muktzah. Right? Rav Yehuda and Rav Shimon, that there is machlokas about nolad. Rav Yehuda forbids nolad. He forbids anything which is new. And therefore Rav Yehuda holds that if utensil breaks on Yom Tiv, you will not be allowed to use because it's a new utensil. Rav Shimon does not prohibit nolad and therefore says it's permitted. Let's go further. Bricks that are left over from construction are allowed to be moved on Shabbos. Right? You have bricks in the front of the shul. You're allowed to move them on Shabbos. Why? Since it's suitable to recline upon it. However, if a person stacks them, then it indicates that a person is not planning on using them to sit on them. You're planning to use them for building. Nowadays, the post can point out, we do not use bricks to sit on, and therefore you have leftover bricks from building. Unless you set them up as a chair or said, I'm going to use them as a chair, you cannot go ahead and use the bricks from the front of the shul because they are muksa. Okay, Amar Nachman, Amar Shmuel, Cheres K'nana Mutzal Tzal B'Chatzer, a small earthenware shard may be moved with inside a courtyard. Okay, so of a carmelis low, but not in a carmelis. Okay, so Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel is basically understanding that since it has a usage in that space, because people are sitting around in that space in the courtyard, you're therefore allowed to touch it in that place. In the Carmelis, people are moving about, they're not really sitting around, and therefore the cheres is not going to be used. However, Rav Nachman Tidei Amar, Rav Nachman himself said, Afil b'Carmelis, of Rishus Rabbim lo, he says in a Carmelis you are allowed to, because sometimes you spit in a Carmelis, you're going to cover it with the shard, and therefore it's allowed. For Rav Amar, Rav says, Afil b'Rishus Rabbim, a person's even allowed to move it in a public domain. Vaz Rav Tamei, Rav holds, why? Because he holds that, as we'll see in a second, that since it's allowed to be used in a courtyard, it still could also have a function in a public domain. He was going to the marketplace in Mechoza. His shoes became soiled. Asa Shmai, his servant came along. His servant took a shard from the ground, a broken shard, and started to wipe off the mud from his feet. The rabbis who were there started yelling, Amar, Gamiri. So Rava turns to him and says, not only you guys not learned, Migbar not Migbar, you're teaching people the wrong halacha also? Keep quiet. I know what I'm doing, okay? No, they didn't mince words there. Ila b'chatzar Abai says if I was in a courtyard, everyone mila havi chaz l'chasuy be'mana. Everyone agree that this shard is allowed to be used to cover a utensil. Hachinami chaz l'tzdi. So he holds once it's permitted to be used in a private domain or a semi-private domain, you could also use it in a public domain. There is no issue in doing so. Let's go a little further. A lid of a cask that was shattered. Mutal l'taltal b'Shabbos, you're allowed to use on Shabbos since it still has a function. Tanya Mahachi, megufa shnichlasa, a lid that was shattered. He ushvaram mutal l'taltal b'Shabbos, you're allowed to use it on Shabbos. Well, you're supposed to mena shever. One should not repair one of its shards. You can't fix one of the shards. Lechasba zakli, v'litzbech ba karemita, or to support the legs of a bed. Vimzar. Okay, so basically you can't fix it, you can't sharpen it, but if it still has a function, you're allowed to use it. Vimzarka ba'ashba asar. And here's the important halacha for us that if a person throws the lid in the trash, then it's forbidden to use on Shabbos. Okay, so very important halacha. If a person goes ahead and so ask the Gemara Masber Papa El Miyat Zerkal Glimi Haknamid. Also, a person throws his garments. Let's say you go ahead and you throw your suit jacket into the garbage for whatever reason. Is it forbidden to use? Of course not. El Papa. Next page. If a person throws something before Shabbos into the garbage, okay, then that demonstrates that you really don't care about this item. And therefore, if you go ahead and say, "Oh no, I threw out the cup. I didn't care about this cup because it's just a plastic cup that whatever I don't want to deal with," and then someone in the family says, "Well, I really like this cup. Why are you throwing it out? I'm gonna, let's say it was trafe, and you want to get a kosher, whatever it is, someone we trafe something up, and I'm like, just throw it out, and someone's like, I really like it. Let's go kosher, whatever it is. But if a person already threw it out, they already demonstrated they don't care about it. You are not allowed to go ahead and it's considered muksa because you've demonstrated by throwing in the garbage that you really don't care for it, and therefore be muksa. So keep that in mind when you throw something out. It's final when it comes to Shabbos. Have a wonderful day. Good night.